Welcome to Mentoring in Real Life, where we talk about what it takes to find and be a great mentor. I'm Angela, and together with my co-host Bill, we know the power of mentoring and what it can do in your life on both sides of the table. If you're interested in learning tips, tricks, and hearing stories about mentoring, you're in the right place. Come join us.
Hey, Bill, how you doing?
Never been this happy, Angela. How about yourself today?
I am tippy-tappy today. I'm extra caffeinated, so let's beware.
I'm scared. Okay, please carry on.
So, Bill, in episode 4, we discussed the difference between mentors, coaches, and advocates as part of a person's career triad. And we discussed how a professional can leverage all three for a well-rounded career growth infrastructure. And recently, one of our listeners sent us some follow-on questions about that episode. She asked, how does one find an advocate in the workplace? Is it usually through professional relationships, networking, and or a current or prior mentor or coach? Many times, individual contributors have a hard time connecting with someone in upper leadership who can advocate for them. So how does one ask someone to advocate for them? And so we took those questions and thought, well, let's get into it and dive deeper into what an advocate truly is and how to find them in your workplace. Anything to add before we get started?
I think let's roll.
Okay. Well, hey, Bill, let's compare and contrast a mentor and an advocate. Remind us, if you will, how do we define a mentor?
Sure. So a mentor is going to help you think better in support of your personal career growth. They're going to help you get some focus about what development you need and give you some insights and perspective on where you're trying to get to. And their role really is to be a sounding board, kind of a guide or a teacher. And they may or may not be in some sort of a power position. They might have influence over decisions in the organization. They might not, but you don't have to have that power in order to be a good mentor to help people help grow their careers. What good mentors do is they ask good questions, they share their experiences and lessons learned, and they help you reflect on how you're doing and try and reframe your thinking towards growing to whatever your goals might be. So, generally speaking, the mentor's typical stance is, let me help you figure this out. They're going to work with you, usually in private and usually over an extended period of time. So their impact is mostly indirect. So given that as the sort of background on mentors, what do we define as an advocate?
Yeah, before getting into that, it reminds me, our tagline is until next time, help others climb. And a mentor really is helping others climb, right? And
Absolutely.
an advocate, of course, can help others climb as well. They help an individual move forward, but their focus is more on providing that individual with visibility opportunities, with opportunities to take on different roles or different projects. And then also protection. So an advocate can also really be the voice in the room to be the person's sponsor, to champion them when they're not in the room. And usually an advocate has a position of power. They have some influence, they have credibility amongst the leadership team within the company or organization, and they have authority. So what they do is they speak your name when you're not in the room. They will recommend you for roles or projects or promotions and push back on perhaps any unfair narratives that might be coming across within the room. So a typical stance of an advocate is someone who says, I'll put my reputation behind you. An advocate acts for you, often publicly, and their impact is direct, unlike the mentor who it could be indirect. So the simplest way to remember it is a mentor helps you to be ready, and an advocate helps you to be chosen. So you can grow without an advocate, but advancement is much harder without one. And so, Bill, can you have a mentor who is an advocate or an advocate who is not a mentor?
Sure. A mentor certainly can be an advocate. It's really all about the influence that the mentor might have in the organization. And on the other side, a leader could be advocating for you without being your mentor. When I think back to promotion boards and so forth, a very important part when I was the big boss in the organization was looking for advocates when we were at a promotion board. Whoever owned that person in the organization would present them, and then I'd be looking. They're obviously advocating, right? If one of the department heads brings somebody's name forward and says, "I think this person's ready," I'd be looking for advocates from the other departments so they don't work directly for them. And I'd be looking for, yeah, that person was great. I saw them on one project, or they were part of a team and they were phenomenal and they were great leaders, etc. So you're sitting in there listening to not only the people who do know the person, but, and much more directly because they work for them, but also other folks within the organization who see that person working and think that they're terrific and think they're the rock star that should be deserving the promotion. Those are identifies actually the people who are the power people, the folks who are on those promotion boards. But obviously, not everybody that's going to be your advocate is necessarily going to be part of your direct line of the community of the organization.
Yeah, that helps people understand when looking for advocates, it does not have to necessarily be somebody within your chain of command. It can be, in fact, somebody outside of your chain of command because advocates in the room will often, especially when it comes to those more senior roles or when it comes to things like promotions, you're going to need people that are influential across the entire organization.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Then how does one find an advocate in the workplace?
Okay. Well, so if you're looking for advocates and you're trying to figure out who are the people who could be your advocate, you need to kind of start with the three non negotiables of advocacy. They can only advocate if they have basically all three of these. Number one is access, two is credibility, and three is a willingness to spend some political capital.
All right. Access, credibility, and willingness to spend political capital. Let's start with the first one. What does it mean to have access?
Well, it's pretty straightforward. Is the potential advocate in the rooms where decisions are made? I talked about promotion boards. And so if you're trying to get promoted, it's important to know who's making those decisions, not just who has an interest in it, but the people who are actually deciding. And so in our old organization, I used to give a brief to make sure people did understand exactly how that process worked so they could know who their advocates need to be. Who's voting on those decisions? And those are people who are become ideal advocates. And obviously, if you're looking for those kind of folks, you're trying to say, how am I going to demonstrate all the skills and abilities that I have to the people who are, in fact, in those positions? Not necessarily all at once, but how am I going to get myself in front of those folks so that they know what I have to offer? And it's not just for promotions, but who's deciding who's going to be in charge of new programs or projects or different positions of leadership? Who's making those assignments? And are they, if they're not the actual decision maker, are they the people who are working with the senior leaders, the selection committees, the people who own all the resources? And uh, just as importantly, do the people above those people listen when they speak? If they don't have the proximity to power, they can't move the outcomes no matter how much they like you. And so when you're thinking about it, hey, could this person influence a promotion, an assignment, or a visibility opportunity? And so that you have to sort of think through those things. And if you're brand new, it's going to take a little time to figure out who those folks are.
Mhm. Yeah. And when you say you won't necessarily find all of them in the same room at the same time when you're demonstrating visibility in front of them, it's because when you have those groups of people that are part of a selection committee, whether it's for a role or assignment or for something like a promotion, it's rare that all of those people are in a room together where you as an individual will have an opportunity to brief them regularly. Those are things like major executive meetings and that kind of thing. But you certainly might have an opportunity to work with them in other capacities at a smaller venue. Maybe it's within their own departments or within specific projects.
Absolutely. We'll get into it a little bit in a little bit, but clearly every time you're interacting with any of the people like that who you think are potential advocates, you got to recognize that those are opportunities to show them that you have something to offer.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So the first The first that we talked about is access. And then you said credibility. The
Yeah.
second piece is credibility. What does credibility mean?
Well, so credibility, ties up with the fact that they're credible in those in those very senior levels of the organization, and they have the ability to spend some social capital in those meetings, in those interactions with the senior folks. And so, if you're looking for those people, you're looking for somebody who has a track record of being trusted. They have a reputation for good judgment, and everybody's taking their recommendations seriously. So, when they recommend somebody, does anything actually happen? I mean, you, you're not going to necessarily know that when you're the new person, but as you spend more time in an organization, you'll start to observe who do people go to, and who are the people that everybody listens to. They're defining the credibility that they have. And if you're still new to the organization, you can use mentors to help advise you on who those people are.
When you say that, it reminds me that there might be some role-based people that that they are trusted, that they have a reputation for good judgment, and that other people take their recommendations seriously because they were given a role, because they were promoted into a role. But those aren't the only people, right, that we're talking about.
Absolutely true. And again, this comes with experience in whatever the organization is. By definition, if you're a person in charge of a department, there's a presumed level of credibility that goes along with that. But you can also observe the way that the organization behaves and who do people go to every time there's a tough question to be answered. Those are the people, whether or not they are in a specific position of leadership, are actually driving behaviors because they are, in fact, by definition, if everybody goes to them for answers, by definition, they're leaders in the organization. So it could be role based, but it's not only role based credibility, it's the people that everybody depends on.
Hmm. This goes back to, we've talked about this in the past too, that leaders can be, have some, uh, leaders can have influence based on their role, and they can have influence based on their influential nature. And you're looking for people who are in either or both of those categories when you're looking for advocates.
Absolutely true. It goes back to sort of what I always thought was one of the simplest definitions of leadership. Leadership is the act of gaining followers. And so maybe you have followers because you're in some role based position where they have to follow you. And maybe you have followers because you always have really, really good ideas. And as
Hmm.
we observe that, those kinds of folks, those leaders, are people with credibility in the organization.
Hmm. Hmm. All right. So access, credibility were the first two. And then you mentioned a third piece of advocacy, and that is a willingness to spend political capital. What does that mean?
Yeah. So this is sort of a quiet differentiator. You know, would that person put their name behind somebody publicly? Right? Do they reference the people that they've developed? And just as importantly, do they correct a narrative or defend somebody when the stakes are really high? You know, hey, I worked with Angela and she's ready and I stand by that. Am I willing to say that when it really, really matters in one of those, in a board or some selection committee for some job? It's it's fundamental. If you want a good advocate, they have to be willing to stand by you when it really, really matters.
Hmm. Yeah. All right. Let's say you don't yet have a mentor, or your mentor isn't able to connect you with advocates. There are ways of gaining advocacy even without the mentoring connection. The first thing you want to do is be the person everyone wants on the team. When you are that person, then you start to gain your own reputation as somebody people want to follow to your definition of leadership.
Absolutely.
And also recognize that every briefing, every interaction with someone senior to you, every time you go above and beyond, every time you volunteer to help the organization, that is an opportunity to gain advocacy and find your advocates. Bill, what are some other ideas how to connect with advocates?
Well, so I think you really got us on a good path here. So at every opportunity that you might have to brief the leadership team or, or after those briefings, there might be informal opportunities to be reaching out and establish a connection with some of the senior folks from the audience. You got to be looking for those opportunities and lean into it when you get the chance. When you get to those folks and you get to have that informal interaction, if you sort of sense the connection is positive, you can certainly say, "Hey, listen, could I get a time to chat with you about where I'm trying to go and what you think about that and what you think I need to work on?" And then, if you get that kind of interaction, that's another opportunity for more positive interaction that could certainly lead to advocacy further on down. And you can ask your supervisor, what are the corporate initiatives that are happening or that I could go volunteer for or get involved in? Because those things almost always include some senior representation, or if not, they get briefed to senior leaders. And so when you do that, you're involved and you're doing good work on those initiatives. There's a terrific opportunities to gain advocacy.
Hmm. It reminds me of something that we did in our previous organization where we made opportunities for individual contributors to interact with senior leaders through something we called poster sessions. And we would set these up in a lobby just before or after larger executive level meetings. And we know for a fact that those sessions resulted in real advocacy based on some extremely positive interactions that would likely have never occurred without those opportunities. So what would happen is either before or after, an executive level discussion, the people would stand next to their posters. They'd first of all, take the time to create their posters. And the posters would be about a project that they're working on, or especially in our organization, something that they helped create, whether it would be a new invention or a patent or something along those lines. We had plenty of those within our organization, but just something that they were involved in. And they would create literally a poster, like on a foam board, that would talk to the project, that would talk to the invention or the engineering capability that they developed out. Senior leaders beforehand would take the time to come up before the meeting started and look and talk to the folks around the posters. And then afterwards or during breaks, talk to the people who were standing next to their posters and ask them questions about it. And this gained an opportunity that these people would not otherwise have. And so supervisors and mentors can certainly help create poster session type of events and select those they'd like to participate. So, for example, if a more senior person, like a supervisor or mentor, knows of an upcoming strategic planning meeting or executive level type of meeting, a quarterly review, something along those lines, then he or she can suggest holding a poster session before and after the event, and then help select the individual contributors that would be participating and give guidance to those individual contributors on their posters, help set up the easels and that kind of thing. And then, of course, let the executive team know that this is going to be happening before the event or after the event. And again, help highlight the work that those individual contributors are doing or are involved in.
Yeah, this is a foot stomp moment actually for any opportunities like that individual contributors would have. Some of my favorite times when we were still working at that organization were those poster sessions, because the thing that gained advocacy from me, and I know from other senior leaders of the organization, absolutely was interacting with the individual contributors on something that they're working on. And so they're obviously the smartest person in the room on that effort. They know more about it than we will ever know because they've been doing the work. And when somebody was like that and was passionate and engaged and was demonstrating not just their skills, but also the attitude that everybody wants to see from somebody who's working hard to solve hard problems, you gain instant advocacy, because those really, really stuck in my mind for a long time. And I became those people's advocates without even thinking about it. And so it's a really important opportunity. Again, the individual contributor, you are the smartest person in that conversation. You know your work, you know what you've been doing, and if you can share with the senior leaders that passion that you have for what you're doing, it's invaluable in gaining advocacy.
Yeah. So it's really a call to action that we have here for supervisors and mentors to create these moments for individual contributors. And individual contributors highlight this idea to your supervisors and mentors. If you already don't have something like this within your organization, maybe suggest it. Point them to this episode. Give them our contact information for more information about how to set it up in a successful way such that your individual contributors gain access to the executive team that they might not otherwise have.
Yep. And so if you're the person that's looking for an advocate, there's going to be some signals along the way. And I was thinking about it when I was talking about how much I was motivated by those poster sessions, because I would actually give these clues when I was talking to the people, hey, by the way, I mentioned you in a meeting last week because I love that work that you demonstrated to me, or, you should meet so-and-so. You should meet Angela because it's important to the work that you're trying to get done. And I'm going to make an introduction for you. Or, for instance, if some specific job that you're looking for, if a project management job opens up, I'm going to keep you in mind. Those are certainly early advocacy behaviors. They're invitations for you to deepen the relationship with your potential advocate. And so once you start hearing those kind of clues, it's an invitation to make sure that your ambitions are known and invite some feedback from the potential advocates. Hey, I'm really interested in being a project manager. What skills do you think I need to be working on so I can be competitive for that? There's such great opportunity in those discussions. So as you see that coming from potential advocates, lean in and try and get their attention and get some feedback on where you're trying to go.
Mm-hmm. You know, as we're wrapping up, Bill, it just reminds me that advocates are really the propellers to career advancement.
That's kind of a nautical term for an Air Force person, isn't it?
Well, hey,
Oh, I'm
Bill,
sorry. Airplanes have those too?
airplanes have
Well,
propellers
old ones
too.
do. Old ones do.
Airplanes have propellers too. Yes.
Okay.
So mentors are great thought partners and advisors, and those who can also advocate with their access or leverage their credibility and are willing to spend their political capital on your development turn out to be real true linchpins for a person's career. If you're having trouble connecting with advocates, consider talking to your mentor or supervisor and maybe even suggesting that call to action about poster sessions. Bill, what else would you like to add?
Well, I just want to sort of foot stomp the idea of if you're really trying to grow your career, advocates are just going to be critical to getting there. And so take advantage of this stuff. It doesn't mean sucking up to anybody. It means engaging with people who are going to be in the decision-making spaces and making sure that they know what you have to offer. And so, as you said, mentors are great folks to help you gain that. Some mentors, in fact, can be good advocates as well because they're in some power position. But the key is to make sure you're checking out who are the folks who are going to be making those decisions and trying to find ways to connect with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anything else?
I think that'll do it. So, with that, thank you very much for listening to this episode of Mentoring in Real Life. If you have thoughts or questions, feel free to leave us a comment or send us an email, which we've included in the show notes. If you like what you heard, please subscribe, rate the podcast, and share with a friend. Until next time, help others climb.